What do you think South Africans bring to the table?
South Africans are just wonderful problem solvers, understanding different people's points of view.
Someone looking to get hired remotely as a South African who may not have worked remotely before, what are some things you need to be aware of?
I think working remotely can be extremely isolating. Like those can be really big challenges, and it can feel really lonely at times.
The amount of times that I've put my hand up for something that makes me a little bit uncomfortable, it has always led to some very exciting career growth. Oh my goodness, we were at the same company at the same time. I didn't even know this. Hello, and welcome to South Africa Tech Marketers. My name is Kirsty Lang, and I'm thrilled to be bringing you another episode where we uncover the journeys of marketers who are absolutely thriving in South Africa and beyond in the hope of helping you do the same. So with me today is Kirsten Van Rooyen, Associate Director of Marketing Strategy at Superside. Kirsten, great name first, and thank you very much for making the time for me today.
Thanks for having me. Excited to chat.
Yeah, it's going to be so cool. So before we get into that, the housekeeping, this show is brought to you by the global talent company, which aims to help marketers based in South Africa find their dream remote jobs at incredible tech companies all over the world. So if you're a marketer looking for your next gig, or you're looking to recruit some amazing marketing talent, definitely check out their website, globaltalent.co. We'll put the links in the show notes, as we always do. But Kirsten, thank you so much for making time. As I said, I've already been fangirling over your background. If you're watching the video, Kirsten also has. Is it a dark green? I'm also seeing a bit of dark green.
It's actually blue, but it comes out green on camera.
I love that. And we were also chatting about how when you work remotely, like we do, your background becomes a core part of your entire personality. And then when you meet people outside of the environment of their Zoom or video background, it's kind of jarring. You're like, wait, where's your potted plant that's always on your shoulder? It's, yeah.
And people always know an obscene amount about your pets that just arrive randomly on the screen.
Yes. No, before we get into it, you have 2 cats and they may come in and out. Their names are, just so we know who our special guests are today.
Okay. So Bailey, who's just walked in the door, so she's likely to make an appearance, and Kowalski.
Kowalski. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Like from Fantastic Beasts?
No, it's from the penguins in Madagascar. My husband likes to say, the character in Vanishing Point, because that sounds a little bit more posh than Madagascar.
But that's a great name. I'm pretty sure, I need to go and Google this when we get off. I'm pretty sure that Kowalski is the sidekick in Fantastic Beasts.
Indeed he is. A huge fan over here. Correct. You are right.
What a name for a cat. That is an excellent cat name. Okay. Yeah. Before I get deep into Harry Potter lore, because that can happen to me sometimes, Kirsten, tell us a bit about your career journey so far. I'd love to know kind of where you started and how you got to the position you're in today.
Sure. I have a little bit of an odd story. Well, I think it's a bit of an odd story. I actually started my career in the music industry. I studied sound and music production. It was kind of what I thought my career path would be. So I worked on the marketing side at a record company, and to give away my age slightly, it was very cool.
You're very cool.
To give away my age slightly, it's at the time when Facebook was kind of launching fan pages and all of that was happening. And because I was on the marketing side, they were like, can you figure this out? So we started setting up fan pages. I mean, as they do.
I was also one of those social media managers. You're young, just handle this, please. Yeah.
Yeah, just say it, just do it. I started setting up the fan pages for the artists I was working with at the time. And at kind of the same time, YouTube was starting to expand into advertising, and we were looking at what options there. Video is a great tool for artists. And the more I got into that, and the less time I was able to spend producing music, which is what I wanted to do, I realized that maybe there's a career path here. So after a little while in the record company, I decided I really wanted to learn more about this digital and marketing world. And I was very lucky to then get into a role at Naspers, where we were working on an app that kind of consolidated all of their publications into one place.
What was the app called?
My Edit.
Oh my goodness, we were at the same company at the same time. I didn't even know this. I was at Media 24. Yep. Yep.
Oh,
Around the My Edit
where were
time.
you?
I was a journalist at the time.
At what publication?
Like
sorry, they might have to cut this bit off, but it's fine.
No, this is great. So I was with You Magazine for a big portion of this time. And actually, so many of the guests I've had on the show have been at Media 24 in some weird capacity. The company is so big, and it tends to just it's a hub for learning and growing and being challenged.
Yes.
If that's diplomatically put. Yes. Okay. So My Edit, that's fascinating. What a cool project to work on.
Yeah. So I was there. I was part of the sales team, and I was just helping with like the data reporting on the campaigns we were running for the clients at the time. And during that time, because it was Media 24 and a big company, Google then started its kind of training in South Africa. So I was able to do, I think, like 18 weeks of Google training, learning how to use analytics, learning how to use ads, getting into that. And I really loved it. And I really loved the performance side of it and the data side of it, and, how it can apply to the creative side of the things that we were doing for our customers there. So I think fast forward from there, I then moved into agency world. So I worked at 25 AM. It was acceleration media, so very much like performance driven media buying. We were doing lots of social media management, content creation for brands ranging from Pomacidor selling food goods all the way through to insurance brands, telcos, everything in between. And I was there for many, many years, and then decided, I've got lots of experience in media and I understand data really well. I'd really like to get more experience in creative work. So I then took on a very strange role within a media. So I was at Omnicom, the kind of media powerhouse, but I worked within the creative department, but as the media expert in the creative department. So quite a strange role that I had. So I worked for Fresh Hive OMD Massive during that time. And a big part of my job there was helping creatives to understand how to translate work effectively onto the channel. So a lot of creatives, they were starting to get an understanding of the platforms, now Instagram was coming up, Twitter was a big thing, YouTube is becoming more prevalent. A part of my role was just really helping them take the media chase list and say, okay, how do we adapt this asset to be the most effective thing it can be on the channel it's going to be on? And how do we iterate? How do we scale? How do we test across different things? So I did a few years there, worked on really exciting brands, McDonald's, Kia, Standard Bank, MTN. So lots of telco experience, some QSR experience, and then an opportunity arrived for me to join a company that needed help setting up their digital department, focused on African business. So basically any advertising you wanted to do in Africa from a media perspective, Simply Black were able to facilitate that. So I stepped in to set up the digital department there. And then very similar to the challenge I was facing before, we were not able to get African creative agencies to iterate content effectively for the channels we were looking for. It was very much like, here's your flyer, but it's also your billboard. And it became really hard to do wonderful things for our customers. So we then set up a creative division within that. So the flip side of what I was doing before, we now had a creative team within a media agency, and we were guiding then customers to how to execute effectively on digital channels across Africa. So that went from everything from the way their communities were managed to the way their content was disseminated across channels, right the way through to how that also then leaned into what we were doing on the ATL space, what we were doing on radio. So a real kind of end-to-end experience. And this year got lots of really exciting experience, more telcos, really big international brands, quite a few tech companies, a lot of NGO work, which was really exciting and rewarding to work on. I was there during the pandemic, so got to work on quite a few exciting campaigns. And then kind of got to the point I was looking for a new adventure. I wanted more experience working on more global brands. And then the Superside opportunity came. So now I'm here. I head up the marketing strategy team. We work with Superside's customers as partners to be able to, again, take their strategy and translate it to effective creative work. And then helping with everything in between, from crafting effective briefs right the way through to full campaign and brand planning.
That is such an incredible breadth of experience. I'm quite jealous in a way, because I came to marketing not late, but I mean, I was kind of a career pivoter. So coming in from media to marketing, and obviously there is a huge amount of crossover. But I think particularly the agency experience that you're talking about, where you're kind of jumping between different clients, making sense of how things work in different industries, and also the performance side of things, is something that's definitely a growth area for me. And what strikes me about that is I love that you came in from the music industry, because I often find that I'm also musically inclined, and the marriage between art and science in music is very similar to marketing. And it's so cool how you have, with your career trajectory, you would expect someone like you to have gone into the creative side of things. But I love the way you just jumped straight into performance and growth and the analytical side of things. Because that is still a new frontier for me. That must be absolutely fascinating to work on.
It's such an exciting space. I'm one of those nerds, like give me a data sheet, and like I'm in my best elements. I think it's just I think what I really like about it is it's a mystery. Like every time you don't know what you're looking for, like all your obvious indicators are there. Like you can see from a baseline level, like, are we driving kind of the right indicators? But then if something is working really well, then digging deeper, like understanding why that is happening. Is there a social influence happening in this space? Was the creative really impactful? Like, and what about the creative makes it work really well? And then the reverse of it, like, why isn't this working? Like, where are things going wrong? So I think it's a really interesting space to play. And I really look at it like a mystery. Every time I get to dive into the details and like unpack the data and try to figure out, whether it's on customers' performance or like trying to find the data to support like how we position something in a creative space or connect with an audience effectively, like just finding the one thing that will just make a difference.
I love that. That's such an incredible skill, because as someone in the creative side of marketing, I think we can easily fall into the trap of, oh, it just didn't land. Or, and even worse than that is kind of throwing something out into the world. And this is something that I'm quite guilty of, is I like to make and create, and then I'm done and I move on to the next thing. And I don't kind of look back. Okay, what impact did this have? Was it worth all the time and effort that I spent, creating this podcast, this video, or whatever the case is? So yeah, I need to be following you on LinkedIn more closely and learning from you, because we're gonna dig into that a little bit more, because I'm fascinated about that side of things. But I did also want to ask you a bit about Superside and how the company works, because they've been on my radar for a very long time. I love your work. I think you guys do incredible stuff. Your branding is phenomenal. It is so standout and so memorable. If you've not heard of Superside, definitely go and check them out on LinkedIn and YouTube. They have a great YouTube. Actually, your YouTube channel was one of the inspirations when I was looking to kind of build out a strategy for Buffer's YouTube. So just as an aside, yeah, you guys are doing wonderful work. I was just hoping you could chat a bit more about how the company works and who you guys serve.
Okay. So we're a fully global remote company. So I think we have almost 800 Supersiders across 70 countries and 19 time zones. Yeah, it's a lot of very talented people. And we function as an extension of creative and in-house marketing team. So we like to say we're your creatives, because So it's a subscription model. You sign up and you are then able to brief in any work that you need to be done within the wide variety of skills that we have within the teams. And because of the remoteness and the scale of our team, we're also able to work across time zones. So if someone is briefing us late in the afternoon on the American West Coast, the team then sitting in APAC and EMEA are then able to pick that up, execute the work, and almost while our customer is sleeping, we're then able to deliver. So it gives us scale across all of the things that we do, and also high quality work. We have quite an extensive hiring process, and we're really focused on making sure we get kind of the top talent that we can in all of the areas that we execute in.
And it makes sense then that you have so many South African folks working there if you're only hiring top talent. I love seeing how many South African people work at Superside, and how the company has just tapped into this wonderful wealth of creative and strategic marketers that we have here. How is your team set up? I would imagine that, is it the case of then you need, strategically you will have someone working in each time zone, so your team is fully almost a 24-hour in each kind of unit? Am I asking the right question? Yes.
Yeah. So we have kind of two groups of teams. So we have a group team that run in the EMEA time zone, so spread across South Africa and up into Europe. And then we also have a team based in the Americas time zone, so all of your Latin American countries, which just gives us the coverage that we need. At Superside, we focus on American enterprise customers and can facilitate any kind of creative work that they need.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And in terms of the company being completely global, and you mentioned the competitive hiring process, that also means that it is a whole lot more competitive, because you're not just competing with South African people, you are competing with people all over the world. I'd love to know a little bit more about how you ended up there. What was the hiring process like for you as a candidate?
It was really extensive. So, and it was a while ago now. But yeah, so I mean, a couple of first interviews. So you'll meet with a hiring manager, and then with the talent partner. So we have an in-house talent team that then source this global top talent. And then you'll meet with the hiring manager, possibly then a case study or a second interview. And then there's a couple of interviews after that, to really make sure you're a good fit. I think in a remote environment, more than anything, you need to make sure, the person is the right kind of person. I think it can be very difficult for people to adapt to working in a remote environment. So, just covering all those bases and making sure the things that make people uncomfortable about a remote workspace, or the pitfalls that we might have come across with other people, that we're covering that, and we're making sure we're making the right decisions.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. That's kind of triggering something for me that I've been thinking about lately. I've seen a lot of, especially on TikTok and a bit on LinkedIn, there's a lot of pushback at the moment against extensive hiring processes. And that it's so tricky, because having been a candidate and then having been a hiring manager, I also understand why it requires so much input from candidates. So when you're asked to do an assignment, when you have multiple interviews, my general feeling is, if the job is worth having, it's worth putting in the time and effort. But I know there's also a fine line where companies do take advantage, and they will ask people to, complete assignments and then, not hire them, but then still run with their ideas. So that is tricky. And as I would imagine that you have been on hiring teams at Superside now, and the point you've made about really making sure someone fits well if it's a remote environment, because you get such a good sense of a person when you meet them face to face, right? But when you meet someone remotely, there's a bit of a barrier there. And I wondered if you could speak to that from, someone looking to get hired remotely as a South African who may not have worked remotely before. What are some things you need to be aware of as part of a hiring process?
Yeah, so I think in the hiring process itself, I think be really open with your experience in working remotely, and also your reservations that you might have about it. If you're going to work for a company and they have the remote option available, I think like be open about the things that concern you about that, and allow them to come back with like how they handle it. Then it also gives, I think, you as a candidate a good sense of like, is the company right for me? Because as much as the company has to make sure you're right for them, you need to make sure
Yeah,
you're
that's such
making
a
the
great
right
point.
decisions for your career. So I think just being upfront about like the things that concern you and the things that worry you about working in a remote environment, whether it's from like, how does payment work if you're getting an offshore payment, all the way through to how do my working hours now work? Do I now need to work on a completely different time zone? And getting all those kind of questions out in the early stages of the interview process, so that whether you're going to continue with it or not.
That's a
And
great
if
point.
that's something you want to pursue, because hiring managers are spending a lot of time and energy talking to lots of people. And I think the quicker you as a candidate can make a decision if it's a good fit for you is beneficial to yourself and to the people that are interviewing you.
That makes a lot of sense. I love that you said that you have to also make sure the company is a good fit for you, because there is nothing worse than being stuck at a company where you feel like you're bumping up against problems, or you're not a great fit, or you don't enjoy the work that you're doing. That makes a lot of sense. I do also want to pull on a thread that you've mentioned now about how working remotely is not for everyone. I think you mentioned that. What exactly? Let's dig into that. What exactly do you mean by that? Who might it be for, and who should maybe reconsider remote work?
Yeah, so I think working remotely can be extremely isolating. There's no chat over the coffee machine in the morning. It's really hard to bounce ideas around. Like, you're often in a different time zone to maybe someone you're collaborating with. So like, those can be really big challenges, and it can feel really lonely at times if you don't build a way to deal with it. So like having someone on the team that that you can chat to, and like maybe it's just like a quick huddle in the mornings and like quickly bounce ideas off each other. But you have to build coping mechanisms around it, because it can be extremely isolating. And I think also managing your work-life balance is actually harder in a remote environment, because I'm sitting in my home. When I close my laptop, I'm still in my home. I think just like putting your firmer boundaries in place, like knowing this is the time I'm starting and this is the time I want to end. And there is some wiggle room, like maybe you need to do a later meeting to cater for a customer in a different time zone, or a team member or something of that sort, like knowing what the wiggle room is, but then being strict about how you almost take the time back. So, maybe I'm going to start work a little bit later, or have an extended lunch. Those are things to consider, like putting up the boundaries. I think it can be really hard to do that. I think particularly as South Africans, we're hardworking and we want to put in the hours. But there's a limit to everything, right? We can't burn the candle at both ends. So it's important that you are clear on what that looks like for you. And I think another thing people take for granted is like the discipline. Like, there's nobody in the office next to you, not like watching that you're working on something, because that's, we're not spies, and that's not how we manage teams. But like, there's nobody there kind of making sure things are happening. Like, you have, the responsibility is completely yours to get through the things that you need to get through and achieve the things that you need to achieve. So like, having that discipline. But on the flip side of all of that, like, remote working does give you that flexibility. Maybe you have children, you have a school concert in the morning, or something you need to attend in the afternoon. Like, it gives you that flexibility to work your diary around that. It also allows you to work at times where you work best. So I'm not one of these people, but if you're a night owl and you prefer to maybe start working later in the day and work into the evening, like, that could also be a really big benefit for somebody who is looking to work remotely, because not everybody's a morning person, not everyone's a night owl, and it just gives you that flexibility in your own life to work where you work best.
I love that. And I love that you also mentioned that there is a give and take involved, because if you do have colleagues in, wildly different time zones, you may have to hop on a call at 8 p.m. or 6 a.m. or whatever the case is. When I got hired at Buffer, I was very overexcited. This speaks to the South Africanness in me, I think. But we have a monthly all hands conversation where the entire company joins, and they try to kind of switch up time zones so that it's good for folks in APAC or that it's good for folks in EMEA regions, so that it's not too disjointed. And I think they had one that was more kind of Asia Pacific time zone about 2 months after I joined. I woke up at 3 a.m. for that meeting. I was like, I'm hopping on the call. I'm gonna be the overachiever. And my manager messaged me, and she's based in the US, and it was also a weird time for her. She was like, Christy, what are you doing? I said, we don't expect you to be here. You can just catch up on the recording. And I was like, yeah, but I'm here. I'm listening. And of course, I fell asleep halfway through it with my AirPods in. Thank goodness my microphone didn't suddenly come on and I was snoring. But yeah, there is such a give and take to it. And also that the time where you work best, that's such an underrated benefit. I find that I have a really productive time in the morning. And then sometimes in the early evening, I've also never considered myself a night owl, but early evening, I tend to be able to just kind of power through some stuff. And I don't know if it's because I'm tired and I want to relax, or it's just, I have a really productive window then. And it works out so well for me being able to structure my day around my toddler, but also around those productive windows. So I love that you raised that. Kirsten, something else that you mentioned that is one of my standard questions. Having worked with folks who are based all over the world, obviously having worked in South African environments, what do you think South Africans bring to the table at international companies like Superside?
I think from a human being perspective, we're naturally a diverse country. We understand lots of cultures. We understand nuance in things people say. We understand sensitivity around saying certain things, just because of the nature of the country we were brought up in. So working with teams all over the world, I found it really easy to adapt because I'm used to, in my career, understanding different people's point of view, understanding that they have a different history and a different perception of things than the one that I have. So that diversity, I think, it makes it really easy to adapt to working with different cultures and different people from across the world. So that is the one thing. And I think from a work perspective, South Africans are just wonderful problem solvers. Like, we get given a lot to do with limited resources, and whether that's coming from a brand, whether that's, past agency, whether like that is the world that we're living in, we're often expected to do a lot with very little, and we're really great problem solvers. Like, we're good at finding unique and innovative solutions because that's how we have had to function, not only in our careers and our lives, like planning our lives around load shedding. Like, I don't think we understand the skills that we have learned around that.
Yes.
And I think don't take that for granted. The ability to look at things from different perspectives and find a solution that makes sense in the timeline and the resources that you have is a skill I think all South Africans definitely in this industry have.
That makes a lot of sense. I love that. It's so interesting that you raise the point about the South African EQ. It's also such an underrated thing, and something that I don't feel that we appreciate enough and talk about enough. My kind of default reaction when it's, why should we hire South Africans? Why are South Africans great? Is my knee-jerk reaction is, oh, we're really hardworking. We're very conscientious, and, traditional kind of South African companies, especially, big corporates, it's very much bums in seats, 9 to 5, and you will get everything done. And then some. It's competitive, and you have to fight for what you want. But that EQ in many ways is also a much stronger soft skill. And having come into a company, where I'm working with folks from all over the world, often there's, they're speaking English in their second language, and I'm able to kind of understand them a bit easier because I'm used to hearing different accents. And yeah, it's such an underrated soft skill. And so many folks actually that I've spoken to on the podcast have mentioned it. And I'm like, yes, why have I never thought of this? That's such a great point.
Yeah. And one thing I didn't mention, I think outside of the soft skills and us being agile and, able to bubblegum and string solutions along, because that's how it's built. I think, here's our special guest.
Oh, hi. Is this Kowalski?
This is Kowalski. Kowalski.
Hi,
there
Kowalski.
He is.
Hi, Kowalski. Okay, guys, watch the video so you can see Kowalski. He's adorable.
So I think also because South Africa is kind of the place for lots of big international brands to launch into Africa. We're kind of like the testing ground. I think we underestimate the exposure we have to things in the world. Often big brands will hub out of South Africa or work with South Africa as then a hub to the rest of Africa. And we get exposure to really big brands, which gives us exposure to the international thinking, the international ways of working, which I think is super important and super valuable in what we do.
Yeah, I love that. That makes a lot of sense. And also something I'd not considered. And Africa is just, especially South Africa, is just booming when it comes to tech. I feel like I'm seeing more startups, so many exciting companies. I mean, yeah, you just have to walk around the Cape Town city center to, see all of the changes that are happening. And it's a good place to be. Okay, I'm so sorry. I've kept you so long already, Kirsten. I do have two more questions for you.
That's cool.
I would love to get your advice. Firstly, I mean, this is quite a selfish personal question, but if I would love to level up my marketing analytics side of things, are there any resources that you can recommend, courses that you've done, or kind of actions that I can take to improve that side of my skill set?
So I have quite an obtuse view about courses in general. I think, particularly in the world that we work in, they're outdated really quickly. Like I could write something that's super relevant this moment, and by the time I publish it, it is no longer relevant. So I think try and get a base level understanding. Google have some free resources that are great to tap into. But the best advice to learn is to ask for the opportunity. So ask to see the data, ask to sit with the data team, and ask if you can analyze something. Just ask. I mean, it could be private and they might not allow you. Maybe there's limited access. But I think learning on the job is super important because everyone is adapting their skills as things are adapting in the world. And having a base level understanding, from a course, I think a foundational approach to it, I think is a good starting point. But then to actually learn how to do it, you just got to get your hands dirty.
Yep. That's great advice. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. I need to do that. I mean, we have a wonderful data scientist on the team. He not only helps with our kind of marketing analytics, but also with kind of big picture analytics. So he's able to take, and I'm obsessed with this. I think it is so cool. He's able to take all of the data that we gather about social media performance in Buffer and then translate that into actionable things that we can recommend to our customers. So last week, for example, two weeks ago, if you want to see it, it's so fascinating. It's on the Buffer website. We did an analysis of how reels versus carousels versus posts performed on Instagram. And we found that carousels actually way outperformed reels when it comes to engagement, but reels outperformed everything else when it comes to reach. So the recommendation we were able to make to customers was that, if you want to grow on Instagram, reels are the best way to do it. If you really want to engage and build community, carousels are the way forward. But as you say, by the time this podcast comes out, the Instagram algorithm may have changed. So take all that with a pinch of salt. But I mean, this is a fascinating side of things that I'm leaning into at the moment. So thank you for that advice. Something else that I wanted to ask you was if there's a up and coming marketer listening to this and they want to be where you are in the next 5 years, what do you recommend that they do right now?
Try and learn as much as you can from the people around you. I think, depending what business you're in, just try and become a bit of a sponge. Learn, ask lots of questions, be passionately curious about the things that are going on around you, the things that the other teams are doing. Buy them a coffee if you're able to, have a chat with somebody and really pick their brains to be able to learn about all the different facets of the work that you do. And I, to be honest, think that is the biggest one. And I think also push yourself, stretch yourself, maybe chat to your manager or another team and see if there's an opportunity for you to step outside of your comfort zone. And maybe if you're looking at exploring a path or something different, get your hands dirty there a little bit and see if it is a good fit for you.
Yeah, I love that. That makes a lot of sense. I think the amount of times that I've put my hand up for something that makes me a little bit uncomfortable, it has always led to some very exciting career growth. That is great advice. For folks who are listening who are maybe looking for a mentor or someone to connect with, SA Tech Marketers does also have a Slack community. By the time this podcast is out, the community should be all set up and running. So if you want to find me there, I'm going to be in there. I'm going to invite Kirsten too. No obligation to join, Kirsten,
hey.
But it would be lovely to have you. Yeah, I think the goal, and as you mentioned, for folks working remotely, it's also really cool to connect with other people in, more of a relaxed environment. So I'm hoping that is what the community will bring to the table as well. We're able to connect with other marketers working in our time zone. I don't have a lot of that in my job. I'm online for a good 6 hours by myself in the day. So I'm very excited about this. Kirsten, where can folks find you if they want to learn more about you?
I think LinkedIn is a good place. So you can, find me on LinkedIn. I'm sure Kirsty will link everything in the notes below.
I love a link.
Would be great to connect there. And I'm also really passionate about talking to up and coming marketers. So if you want to jump into my DMs and connect, and then maybe, have a 30-minute session, pick my brain, really open to it. I think in my career, that was something that I feel was a bit lacking. Being in offices, it made it a little bit easier to get that guidance and support. But, the world is much more open now than when my career started. So the opportunity is there. If you'd like to set up a little connect, 30-minute chat, always open to that.
That is so generous, and folks should definitely take you up on that. I hope you are not inundated with messages after this, but yeah, there is nothing like mentorship chats, peer chats with other people who are working at a different company, working in your industry, working at a competitor. As you said, courses, all of those other resources, often that information gets outdated really quickly. So we're better to learn than from the source, from the people who are actually doing the work. And I think that is incredible. Thank you so much for making time for us today. I really, really appreciate it. I've learned so much from you, and I'm really excited to follow your journey at Superside and wherever you end up in your career. So yeah, thanks, Kirsten. It's been a delight.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. And looking forward to connecting in the Slack community.
Yay!